All right, what's up, Algebra 2? Sorry, this is a little bit late getting to you here, but this is a pretty easy lesson, and I'm going to skip a few problems so you don't have as many to do as well, okay? So let's go ahead and jump right into this. Now, you're going to need to go up and in the beginning of the lesson and make sure you understand what a conjugate is, okay? So we're going to use conjugates as we do this example. So you'll see what it is, but basically what we're going to do with these is we're going to take, so let's take this first one, 5 over 4 minus the square root of 3. Okay, so we're going to take this, the conjugate of this denominator, okay, which is 4 plus the square root of 3, okay? And we're going to multiply the denominator and the numerator by that. Okay? So what happens when you multiply by the conjugate? Well, I'll show you. So if you take 4 minus the square root of 3, multiply that times 4 plus the square root of 3. All right, just use the FOIL method, so you get 16 plus 4 times the square root of 3 minus 4 times the square root of 3, and then you get minus the square root of 9. So negative square root of 3 times positive square root of 3 gives you negative square root of 9. Okay? And so what ends up happening is the two middle terms cancel out. All right, and then this reduces down to, so you got 16, and then the square root of 9 is 3, so you have negative 3, which gives you 13 in the denominator. Okay, now we're just going to multiply across the top. So that's 5 times 4 plus the square root of 3, and that's 20. So it's 5 times 4 is 20, and then plus 5 times the square root of 3. Okay, so we have 20 plus 5 times the square root of 3. All right, and there's our answer. Okay, all right, let's look at another one here. So again, we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by the conjugate of that denominator. So that's the conjugate of square root of 2 minus 3 is the square root of 2 plus 3, square root of 3. And we're going to multiply the 6 by that same thing. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and, so we take square root of 2 minus the square root of 3 times the square root of 2 plus the square root of 3. What does that give us? Well, square root of 2 times the square root of 2 gives us the square root of 4. The square root of 2 times the square root of 3 gives us positive square root of 6. Negative square root of 3 times the positive square root of 2 gives us negative square root of 6. And then negative square root of 3 times positive square root of 3 gives us negative square root of 9. Okay, so again, when you multiply by the conjugate, it causes the two middle terms to cancel out. And here we've got a perfect square, which is 2, minus a perfect square over here, which is 3, which gives us negative 1. Right, see that? The square root of 9 is 3. We bring this negative sign right down here, and the square root of 4 is 2. 2 minus 3 is negative 1. So that means our denominator here is going to be negative 1. So now we just need to distribute this 6. We just multiply the 6 right across the top. So 6 times the square root of 2 plus the square root of 3 gives me 6 times the square root of 2 plus 6 times the square root of 3. Okay, now these can't be combined. All right, these can't be combined. So we have 6 times the square root of 2 plus 6 times the square root of 3. Okay? And then that right there would just go ahead and change this to, let me make sure something real quick before we put our final answer here, okay? Just a second. Oops. Let's see, that one's 6 over. Bear with me. Yeah. Yeah. So this -1 actually causes all of this just to become negative, right? So it becomes -6 times the square root of 2 minus 6 times the square root of 3. Okay, and then that ends up being your final answer there. Okay, let's do another couple here, okay? All right, how about this one? Okay, so again, we're going to multiply both bottom and top, numerator and denominator, by the conjugate. So that's going to be -3 square root of 5 and -3 times the square root of 5. Okay? So what do we end up getting here? So we take 3 times the square root of 5 times -3 times the square root of 5. And what do you get? You get -9 times the square root of 25. So I'll multiply my coefficients together, and then I multiply my radicands together. Okay, well, think about that. That gives you square root of 25 is 5. So this is actually -9 times 5, which is -45. So that's going to be that's our denominator, -45. Okay, so now we just need to take our numerators. So we're going to take 15 times the square root of 6 times -3 times the square root of 5. Okay, so again, multiply your coefficients together, gives you -45 times the square root of 30. Multiply your radicands together. So we've got -45 times the square root of 30. And these cancel, leaving us with the square root of 30. Okay? All right, let's look at one more here. All right, so again, we're going to multiply by the conjugate. So that's 4 times the square root of 6 plus 3 times the square root of 2. 4 times the square root of 6 plus 3 times the square root of 2. All right, and let's go ahead and multiply our denominators. So we're going to get 4 times the square root of 6 minus 3 times the square root of 2 times 4 times the square root of 6 plus 3 times the square root of 2. Okay, all right, so we're going to multiply these together, right? So it's going to give us 16 times the square root of 36. So we multiply our coefficients to give us 16, and then our radicands to give us the square root of 36. Okay, now 4 times the square root of 6 times 3 times the square root of 2 is going to give us positive 12 times the square root of 12. So 4 times 3 gives me 12, and then square root of 6 times square root of 2 gives me the square root of 12. All right, then I've got here negative 12 times the square root of 12. And then I've got negative 9 times the square root of 4. That's this times this. So negative 3 times positive 3 gives me negative 9. Square root of 2 times square root of 2 gives me square root of 4. All right, now 36 is a perfect square. So this is the same thing as saying 16 times 6. So 16 times 6 is 96. So 16 times 6 is 96. These cancel. And then we have, okay, now this is negative 9 times, actually times 2. Square root of 4 is 2. So negative 9 times positive 2 gives me negative 18. And 96 minus 18 gives me 78. So all of that here, this times this, gives me 78. All right, now we just need to multiply the top. So we've got, I'm going to kind of make like a little division here, a little divider. All right, so we've got 3 times the square root of 6 plus 5 times the square root of 2 being multiplied by 4 times the square root of 6 plus 3 times the square root of 2. Okay, so just use the FOIL method. That's going to give you 12 times the square root of 36. So 3 times 4 gives me 12. Square root of 6 times square root of 6 gives me square root of 36. All right. 3 times square root of 6 times 3 times square root of 2 gives me positive 9 times the square root of 12. Okay, so I've gone this times this to give me this, and I've gone this times this to give me this. All right, now let's go this times this. So that's going to be positive 20 times the square root of 12. And this is going to be positive 15 times the square root of 4. Okay. All right, so again, we've got 12 times the square root of 36. Well, what's the square root of 36? 6. So 6 times 12 is 72. So don't worry about that. All right, now these two terms right here can actually be combined. It's just like saying 9a plus 20a. Okay, so this actually gives us 29 times the square root of 12. Okay, so we combine those. And then this gives us, this is actually 15 times the square root of 4, which is 2. So 2 times 15 is 30. All right, so 72 plus 30 gives me 102 plus 29 times the square root of 12. Okay. Now, I'm a little bit conflicted here because in Ignitia simplifies and cancels, divides both the 78 and the 102 by 2, and you get 51 plus 29 times square root of 12 over 39. Okay. I'm a little bit conflicted about that because I've always been taught that you can't do any canceling unless there's nothing but multiplication going on up here. Okay, but if we want to go along with what Ignitia did, maybe I'm misinformed on that. But if you do, then you end up with, again, this becomes 51, this becomes 39. Okay, so this is actually the answer in Ignitia, but I'll actually take the original 102 plus 29 times the square root of 12 over 78. I would take that as well, because I really don't think that you can cancel here, because not everything, you're not dealing with strictly multiplication up here. You have this addition sign. So anyway, I'll probably just go ahead and skip this one anyway since we did all that work. So I'm actually going to skip. These are actually all questions from your lesson. So we got 1, 2, I guess we did 4 of them. Okay, so I'll skip these 4 that we did together, and you work on the rest, and let me know if you have any questions, okay?